Blessed is the man that walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the way of the sinner, or sits in the seat of the scornful. His delight is in the law of the Lord, and in that law will he meditate day and night. And that man, or that person, that one will be like a tree planted by the rivers of waters, who brings forth fruit in season. The leaves won't wither, and whatever that person does will prosper. I want to see like God sees. I want to hear like God hears. I like to be like God is. Sitting alone one day in the riverside, I looked to see what I could see that couldn't hide. Many faces and conversations, traveling thoughts from several persuasions. What is the meaning of life as we know it? If an Epicurean adventure beyond consequence, we blow it, but not if this pleasure can move us to beauty, and we transcend within beyond time to reality. And these are things I look while alone, looking through others to find my way home. What does it mean, though, to find your way home? To live in a way that's rooted, alive, and not constantly at the mercy of the winds of circumstance or the opinions of others. And how do we step aside so we don't block someone else who's finding their way? So now we are, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whenever you are, wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, or wherever you are where you're tuning in. Before we dive in, I've got a question for you. Have you ever tried to pick fruit in the middle of winter? There's nothing there. It's like looking for pizza in your broccoli drawer, completely out of season. Yet somehow we keep expecting fruit when it's not our season. Or worse, we judge ourselves or others for not having it year-round. It's like we've been trained to expect fruit on demand. It's that grocery store mentality. Grocery stores have conditioned us to believe that we can have strawberries in December and peaches in January, and that somehow it's natural. But it's not. It's not natural. It may be normal, but not natural. It's a system designed to hide reality of the seasons. And that same mindset slips into how we see ourselves. We expect to be in perpetual bloom, always thriving, always producing. And when we're not, we panic. Jeremiah flips this thinking on his head. Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose trust is the Lord. They shall be like a tree planted by water. In the year of drought, it's not anxious. It does not cease to bear fruit. The tree's ability to thrive doesn't come from its branches, it comes from its roots. That's where the connection to living water is. That's what makes it alive when the season doesn't look fruitful. Now, this idea of fruit in season, it shows up right there in Psalms in that scripture. That's that first thing I said when I started this. Blessed is the one that walks not in the counsel of the ungodly. Jeremiah, the teachings of Jesus, and it has everything to do with how we stand, where we stand, and how we live so we don't undermine our own growth. You see, it's easy to get distracted by all the things that pull life away from us. Negativity, doubt, other people's opinions, all those literal hands that come by and pluck at our fruit. You know the type. They take, they munch, and they leave the pit behind in the earth. Let's step back. The psalmist talks about a tree planted by rivers of water, roots growing deep, down deep, leaves that don't wither, and fruit that appears in due season. That's stability. That's resilience. That's the ability to bounce back from harsh weather, from storms, from scorching sun, from shady folk. Because trust me, sometimes it's real shady around here. Paul plays with this in his text to us, in his letter. This similar tension, if we don't believe in the resurrection, he says, then our faith is pointless. Now you might hear resurrection and think, oh, okay, that's just a big old fancy word that happened around 2,000 years ago. It's more than that. Resurrection, it's about your ability to rise above what's trying to bury you right now. fear, failure, frustration, hopelessness. If you go around saying, well, the drought came, guess I'm toast, or I messed up, guess life is all over, I'm done for. You know, if you do that, you're basically nullifying your own resurrection. You're saying there is no bouncing back, no fruit coming later, no reason to hold on. And Paul is like, hold up. If you believe there's no life after death or no life after a deathly moment, we've got a problem. Because the central idea is that life does come after loss, or at least certainly the perception of loss. A new day dawns. Storms, they don't ever last forever. The Beatitudes, the rich and the poor, all these twists that Jesus is taking in Luke, it flips the script on who's winning in life. He calls the poor, the hungry, and the grieving blessed. Now that's odd. And gives a strong warning to the folks who are coasting on comfort. Why? Because when you're all comfortable, sometimes you lose sight of how much you need living water. That living water, when I was a kid, that living water, that breathing water. You don't see the drought coming until you're completely parched. Meanwhile, the people who look parched now are discovering that there's a deeper source, a subterranean river, if you will, that runs beneath the dryness of circumstance, the desert of your storm, the desert of your life, or maybe those who are standing in your way. Sometimes I like to call people storms. Like, my name is Marquis. Do you know what the storm Marquis is? Or do you know what the storm Cynthia is? If you can identify the storm, you kind of know how to respond. You know when to board your windows. You know when to leave town. I'm saying you can't enjoy life if you got resources or a steady gig. Not at all. But the real question is, are you anchored in something that can't be stripped away? If the economy crashes or your reputation takes a hit on social media, because folks were living in an age where a single tweet can ruin your weekend. Let's go back, though, to that tree, that metaphor. The tree doesn't eat its own fruit. Let that sink in. I'm going to say it again. The tree does not eat its own fruit. Your gifts, your talents, your music, your strategic insights, your cutting-edge thinking, those are like fruit you produce for others. And here's the kicker. They'll come around and pick it, sometimes without a please or a thank you. But if your roots go deep, if you're anchored by living water, you'll keep producing in season, no matter who comes by. You're living a life of non-death, a life that doesn't wither because you're rooted in something bigger. I want to say that again. A life that doesn't wither because you're rooted in something bigger. It's almost like poetry. We get so hung up on the idea that we have to guard our fruit 24/7 so nobody takes advantage of us. But guarding your fruit can sometimes kill the tree. You close off. You grow suspicious and petty, and pretty soon you ain't growing nothing at all. Just living, surviving, in fear that someone's out to plunder your branches. That's not abundance. That's not freedom. Plus, let's be honest. If I showed up at an apple orchard yelling, "Hey, that's my apple," I look kind of silly. The orchard's entire purpose is to share the fruit. They want me to take it home, make some pie, bring joy to somebody's grandma, or grandmama, as I would say back in the day. In the same way, your creative orchard, your music, your wisdom, your insight, people, it's meant to be shared. So how do we not undermine our own resurrection? For starters, I don't normally count stuff out, but I give you a few pointers right now. Stop expecting fruit out of season. Don't beat yourself up if you're in winter. Creatively or emotionally, roots grow in winter too. That's a cool thing. 2, don't measure growth by someone else's harvest. Comparing your fruit to their fruit just tangles your branches. It gets you all wicked. Wicker, to be twisted, is the word in Hebrew. To be twisted, like don't dwell in the counsel of the ungodly. Don't sit in the seat of the scornful. Don't stand in the way of sinners. Don't be wicked. 3, remember the drought is just temporary. If you stay planted in deeper truths, living water is accessible, albeit beneath the surface. Don't keep reliving your scornful moments. This is point number 4. Don't do that. Don't relive your past pain, your scornful moments, your betrayals, your turbulence. If you keep focusing on betrayal or heartbreak, you're basically watering weeds. And we got to get out of our way. We also got to get out of the sinner's way. Let's talk about it, what it means, just for a minute, to get out of the sinner's way. The psalm says, blessed is the one who does not stand in the way of the sinners. What does it really mean? First, the sinner here isn't necessarily a person committing obvious wrongs. They're not just the overt criminals you think they are. At its root, sin means to miss the mark, or to miss the scope, or to misunderstand. A sinner then is someone who misunderstands, someone who's lost sight of the target. And standing in their way means blocking them from finding clarity. Here's where it can get really tricky. Sometimes without really realizing it, we become obstacles for others. We get caught in judgment, or even worse, we start commiserating. Misery loves company. And then we join the cycle of pain, frustration, and bitterness. We think we're helping by sympathizing, but really we're just adding weight to the burden. Getting out of the sinner's way means stepping aside so they can find their path, their vision. And it also means, this is going to challenge you, refusing to feed into the negativity. It's saying, I see your pain, but I'm not going to live in it with you. I'm going to point you to the stream. I'm going to point you to the living water. I'm going to point you to what sustains you, what sustains life everywhere. Here's the truth. Sometimes we need to step out of our own way. We block our own growth when we keep replaying old stories, reliving scornful moments, and nurturing our grievances. Getting out of the way means letting go of the need to hold on to those things and trusting that life flows forward, not backward. I like to offer something I call a new human perspective, because I believe we're called to live as new humans, people who recognize that life is meant to flourish, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Those who know that life and love are forgiving more than for getting. You can play with that word sometimes, or those words. You have some fun with it. A new human isn't someone who never sees adversity, though. A new human is someone who refuses to let adversity define them. It's someone who embraces a resurrection mindset. Yeah, that was awful, but I'm still here. I'm still standing. My roots are deeper than I ever imagined. I didn't even know how deep my roots went. I didn't even know how wide they spread. Like Paul says, if the resurrection weren't real, if there weren't any bounce back in this universe, we'd have no reason to hope, no reason to dream, no reason to grow. But the psalmist, Jeremiah, Jesus, and Paul, and your grandmama too probably said this very quiet truth. There is a river. There is sustenance under the surface, and if you tap into that, you can make it through some scorching sun, the bitter frost, and even Them fruit pickers. Those people who come along and just grab that peach, they grab that genius, sometimes they grab that dollar. They might dip into your wallet or dip into your resources, but you want to see like God sees. You want to be in the council of the godly. Sitting alone one day in the riverside, I was looking to see what I could see that couldn't hide. Many faces and conversations and traveling thoughts from several persuasions. What is the meaning of life as we know it? If it's an Epicurean adventure beyond consequence, we blow it, but not if this pleasure can move us to beauty and we transcend within beyond time to reality. But the reason I see by chance was a blessing. I was placed in position because another was missing. But this juxtaposition was not a happenstance grace. For while the other is missing, it doesn't mean out of place. So sometimes the fruit ain't there. Sometimes you're looking at other people and you want them to succeed all the time. And sometimes you're judging them because they're not always flourishing with abounding fruit. You're not supposed to. They're not supposed to. This ain't a grocery store world. Sometimes we cheat each other. We cheat ourselves because we have technology that makes us ignore what's natural. And we confuse what's normal with what's natural. But friends, let's not undermine our own resurrection. Don't let a barren branch or a tough season convince you that the stream is gone. Let's not stand in anyone else's way. Instead, let's step aside. Stay rooted and let the water flow. Trust that in the right season, maybe even a season you least expect, the fruit will appear. And guess what? You won't even have to eat it all by yourself. You'll share it, and that's how the world becomes alive. That's the promise. That's the invitation to a life that doesn't wither, a life that stands, a life that loves, and a life that lasts. Now, if you'll excuse me, I got some fruit to share. But remember, you need to know this. The grocery store may offer you fruit all year round, but real life has seasons. Embrace the rhythm. Trust the roots. And don't block the path for others. We're in this together. Trees by the living waters, growing, changing, and resurrecting day by day. Blessings.